What do you know about sargassum? Is it just the smelly brown stuff that forms clumps on the beach and collects litter? Sometimes in Florida, it seems that there's more sargassum on the beach than there is sand. This year, mass amounts of sargassum were reported washing up on the beaches in Florida and the Caribbean. Here, a photo from the coast of Barbados shows us why some may consider these algae a nuisance. Clearly, something so abundant on our beaches plays an important role in the open ocean. Floating patches of sargassum make up their own unique and important ecosystem, serving as a nursery, feeding ground, and habitat for many marine species. I chose to present on this topic because I've always been fascinated by the critters I would find in clumps of sargassum while I was surfing. On a recent trip to the Keys, I realized that larger patches contained even more life. I was very interested in the complexity of species that utilize this floating ecosystem either directly or indirectly. During several offshore fishing trips in the past few months, I was able to compile some photos and video of the critters I found living in the seaweed patches. Since there's no surefire way to locate sargassum, some trips were more successful than others. Thankfully, the crew that took me offshore had no problem turning the boat around so I could collect samples and jump in the water to film. Sargassum is a phaeophyte, or brown algae, and is found in the Fucales order. Air-filled vesicles found between the branches help keep the algae buoyant and are responsible for the genus name. Sargassum gets its name from the Portuguese word sargaco, meaning little grapes. Portuguese sailors noticed an abundance of sargassum off the coast of the southeast United States while exploring the New World and hence named the area the Sargasso Sea. Like seagrass beds and coral reefs, Sargassum Islands are an important primary producer and habitat for numerous species. Unlike corals and seagrasses, sargassum moves at the mercy of ocean winds and currents. The area deemed the Sargasso Sea is part of the North Atlantic Gyre and is formed by the Gulf Stream, Azores Current, Canary Current, North Atlantic Equatorial Current, and the Antilles Current. The Sargasso Sea is an important migration route for humpback whales, tuna, and multiple species of seabirds. Sargassum is unlike many algae in that it reproduces holopelagically while floating in the open ocean. While other species of algae reproduce benthically or while attached to a substrate, sargassum reproduces through vegetative propagation. Many species of sargassum are found worldwide in temperate and tropical waters. The most common species found in Florida are Sargassum nadans and Sargassum fluitans. Some species are attached and benthic, but the focus of this presentation is on the free-floating varieties. Besides being an important primary producer, Sargassum Islands are home to numerous species of juvenile fish, some of which are commercially and recreationally important. Juvenile fish use the floating seaweed as a protective structure and food source. The billfish, tuna, mahi, and wahoo that use the cover of sargassum to stay protected in their early life will often later return as adults to feed on the juvenile fish looking for protection. This is a photo of a juvenile mahi found in the sargassum. Mahi will return to the seaweed as adults and feed on the various species of fish and invertebrates that live here. Here, a flathead filefish. I found juvenile filefish in almost every bucket of seaweed that I collected. Their slender body shape and coloring allows them to blend into the seaweed and hopefully escape the jaws of a mahi or seabird. Filefish use the sargassum as a protective cover during their juvenile stage and usually move to the reef as adults. Larval crabs, shrimp, and lobsters make an excellent food source for fish, turtles, and larger invertebrates, if they can find them. While I was scooping up buckets of seaweed, many of the fish would swim away and escape. The larval invertebrates, however, stuck so well to the seaweed that I had to shake them off so that I could better see them. Often, these small crustaceans are uniquely camouflaged so that they blend in with the surrounding environment. The sargassum offers protection for these tiny and mostly immobile invertebrates until they mature and are better able to defend themselves. While some fish and invertebrates spend only a portion of their life living in the sargassum, other animals like the sargassum crab and sargassum fish live solely in the seaweed. I found sargassum crabs of all sizes while collecting samples offshore. Here, a photo of a sargassum crab with eggs demonstrates the importance of sargassum as a nursery habitat. Sargassum fish are so well camouflaged with the seaweed that it's difficult to distinguish where the seaweed ends and where the fish begins. These unusual creatures greatly depend on the sargassum as a protective structure and food source. Cryptic camouflage and fins used for climbing through the thick weeds allowed the sargassum fish to be an excellent ambush predator. Sargassum fish occasionally have to worry about being preyed upon by larger fish, yet they are able to jump onto the top of the seaweed and can survive without water for an extended period of time. Being exposed on the surface of the seaweed has its disadvantages, though. Here you see why. Here is some footage I captured using a GoPro while snorkeling off the coast of New Smyrna Beach. If you look closely, you can see some of the smaller fish that use sargassum as a protective habitat. In addition to being an important structure to marine life, sargassum and the communities it supports are of great value to fishermen. Anglers hoping to land mahi know to look for seabirds to determine where the baitfish are. Often, the seabirds and mahi are feeding upon the same prey items found living in the sargassum. Tripletail and wahoo also congregate around the seaweed looking for smaller fish to feed on. The most successful mahi fishing I have ever experienced happened while following seaweed lines. I often see dolphins and turtles near the weed lines as well. Surely they are taking advantage of the abundance of baitfish living within and around the floating algae. On my last trip offshore, I even captured footage of 2 dolphins and a shark right by the weeds. If you look closely, you can see their shadows in the distance. Besides being a feeding ground for popular game fish, sargassum mats support a handful of endangered and migratory species. Seabirds traveling to and from the south use the seaweed mats to refuel and rest before continuing their journey. Humpback whales also travel through the algae mats of the Sargasso Sea during their annual migration. Until recently, little was known about the primary stages of juvenile turtles' lives. Recent studies using satellite transformers on the backs of juvenile loggerhead turtles gives us a greater insight into where the sea turtles spend their early years. Like many other juvenile species, endangered Kemp's Ridley, loggerhead, and green turtles utilize the sargassum mats as a protective structure and food source during their young life. The endangered American eel lives in freshwater rivers and streams as an adult, but spawning and early larval stages occur in the Sargasso Sea. These once abundant eels are an important bait for sport fishing, but the construction of dams has negatively impacted their catadromous life history. Sargassum islands are a vital component of the ecosystem for many organisms and trophic levels within the marine environment. The South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council has deemed sargassum beds an essential fish habitat due to the important role they play in the life history of many species. Whether it is a permanent home, nursery habitat, or feeding grounds, sargassum rafts have an important role in the lives of everything from shrimp to whales. Like coral reefs and seagrass beds, sargassum is sensitive to changes in water salinity, temperature, and quality. Unfortunately, sargassum is not always mentioned in the conversation regarding marine conservation and protection. Pollution and disturbances like oil spills can threaten the health of seaweed islands and compromise the whole ecosystem. In this photo, you can see how easily oil and seaweed become mixed at the surface. Since sargassum floats on the water surface, it's prone to collect litter and debris, another threat for the animals that live here. The same ocean currents that are responsible for large-scale sargassum islands can also cause plastic litter to aggregate and mix in with the seaweed. This becomes evident when tropical disturbances bring large amounts of seaweed and plastic particles to shore. Shorebirds that comb through the sargassum looking for a meal are likely to ingest these tiny plastic pieces. Additionally, recent discoveries for the possibility of algae as a biofuel could prove to be harmful for sargassum if it becomes overharvested. The research and hands-on investigation I completed for this presentation only increased my interest in sargassum and the organisms that rely on it. I encourage you to do some investigating of your own next time you see a clump of sargassum in the ocean. What do you see? How do the animals vary as clumps of seaweed grow bigger? I hope I have convinced you that sargassum is much more than stinky brown weeds that wash up on the beach. Thank you for watching.